All right, Brooke Budke of Momentum Brands. It's a pleasure to finally have you on a podcast of ours. I know you and I have chatted a couple times now and gotten to know each other a good bit, and obviously a little bit more about what you do specifically in the franchise space. And so I'm eager for the audience to hear. I don't want to say a different side of franchising because you've obviously been on the side of like in franchising yourself, which we'll get some background from you there. But the other side of franchising, which is all things marketing, which is massive in the space in general, and that's even got some different, we'll call it tentacles to it, from a franchise, interested franchise candidate perspective, marketing towards that audience. Franchise marketing, obviously on the consumer side, how to go out and attract customers. Like for us, for junk removal, how do we get customers to come in? So more consumer facing type marketing. So without further ado, Brooke, I'll turn it over to you to give a background of yourself, your journey, your experience in the franchising world, business ownership, and we'll take it forward from there.
Yeah, I would love to introduce myself. As you said, my name is Brooke Budke, and I am currently the CEO and founder of a brand called Momentum Brands. And at Momentum Brands, we partner with emerging franchise concepts to really introduce two things. One, business intelligence into the company, and the second is marketing infrastructure, resources, tools, templates, and really all of the back end nuts and bolts you need to have a successful franchise operation. Because in franchising, you have usually a really great founder concept. And then once you start franchising, you're actually running both. You're running your founding concept and the franchise business. And there are so many things missed on the franchise side of business because you're operating in this I don't know what I don't know lane. And
Yeah.
so that's where partnering with us comes in, because as a chief marketing officer and former brand president in my career, I really believe that success leaves clues. And my job is to help brands gather those clues, get successful faster, compress decades into days, and really just understand all of the moving parts the brand needs, the franchisee needs, the potential franchise candidate, really to get more exposure onto your brand at the unit level, to the national level, to franchise sales. So
Yeah.
there's lots of cycles of the business, but our sweet spot is really working directly with emerging brands, usually under 200 units, and helping you introduce scale. So, where I came from was franchising. I've been in franchising more than a decade as the head of marketing, and then was ultimately helped take a company with 200 units to market, and then the new ownership group named to be president. And then I was also pregnant for the first time in my life and deciding what I was going to do. And I had just achieved what I thought was exactly what I wanted. And what I realized was the joy of a startup is so unique to find, first of all, people that really enjoy that. And second of all, then to put some proven business models and duplicatable revenue streams in place for brands is really what I love doing. And so that's when I founded Momentum Brands, was to work with partners like yourself to say, how do we take and grow a concept that just more people need to know about, which is
Yeah.
always comes back to marketing.
Yeah. That's an amazing background, Brooke. And I could go down different rabbit holes here, but I'll start with so your experience there, and you talk about the things that franchisors miss when they go and launch their franchise. So talk about a little bit about your experience of like how with your experience, like how did you identify that Zors like me and everybody else who we've stood up a business for us, use a real life example. We stood it up, have been running it for 6 years, and then we made the decision, hey, we're going to go and make this a franchise model. We've been doing that. So I totally get that piece of it, running the business, scaling it, growing it, hiring, all things that comes with starting a single unit business or however many corporate owned outlets you have. And then you turn your attention to a franchise model. And this is everything, I'm kind of just regurgitating everything I've learned over the last 12 to 16 months ever since I dove into this world. And you kind of turn your attention to what, folks say you're not really going to be doing that, or you don't need that skill set any longer. Like you need it obviously to continue to run your outlets, but like when you become a franchisor, your skill set really needs to evolve into more people management and a different kind of side of the business. So through your lens, when you talk about just what franchisors miss, like how did you learn about all the stuff that we have, folks before me have missed and what I'll likely miss as we go through our franchise model, and maybe just highlight what are those things that most franchisors typically miss as they launch a brand that, if they
Mhm.
could go back and fix it, it probably has a world of difference if they had done it in the first place.
Absolutely. The first place is franchisee selection and
Hmm.
saying no to potential franchise candidates. And that is the hardest thing to do when you're young as a brand, and a brand that is in the early infancy stages of growth. When you have somebody who's interested in being a franchisee, you're like, let's go all in. We'll do it together
Hmm.
and we'll help you along the way. And usually, what happens is the first handful of franchisees end up selling and they'll go through a resale process, 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, because the model evolves so much from your very first unit to hundreds of units that are open and profitable, and your franchisee candidate selection does too. And that's one of the things that you don't realize, that you swing and miss a lot on until you have enough units that you're looking at. Okay, if we were to see what are the key identity traits, behaviors, characteristics, and belief patterns that cause success in a franchisee
Yeah.
compared to the franchisees in our system that are not successful, that's when
Hmm.
you could really start to separate and say, okay, who is our ideal candidate and what are we looking for? Is it an owner operator model? Is it absentee? Is it semi absentee? Are you area developer? Is it single unit? Like, there are so many different factors when it comes to who the candidate is, and do they, are they running the business? Are they not? Or how big is their staff? Like, all of these questions come into play. And I think it's one of the early on mistakes that all franchisors make, because a lot of it is like, you're a parent and there's so much you learn in parenting because you're thrust into a role that you don't have a guidebook on. Nobody
Yeah.
says this is how you become a parent, and you literally wing it every day of your life until you die as a parent and then as a grandparent. And
Hmm.
franchising, there are proven models of success because you want the playbook and you want the replicatable business model to be there when franchising, but so much of it is learning from error and
Yeah.
learning by doing it wrong, and having grace for your franchisees and your franchisees having it for the franchisor, which
Hmm.
goes back to the selection process, and really identifying, even if you don't have a lot of open units today, to say there are usually 3 to 7 characteristics and traits that they have to possess in order to be
Hmm.
successful in your unit, and being confident enough to say no if you know that they don't possess it.
Right.
Having a very analytical person as a franchisee and a very people driven community based franchise usually doesn't work.
Right.
So, like, as an example, right, so
Hmm.
having franchisee selection is important. One of the verticals that we actually help with is on franchise development marketing, and understanding who your target demographics are and how you reach him or her or the groups or the area developers, and organic structures, page structures, et cetera, and really targeting in on who you want to be in business with. These are
Yeah.
10-year agreements. It's a marriage. It is not
Hmm.
a dating process. And
Yeah.
so figuring that out first usually is where I see the most pitfalls, because most of the time franchisors spend 80% of the time on the bottom 20% in coaching
Hmm.
them
Yeah.
and trying to get them to perform better. And then your top 20%, you could call them once a month, once a quarter, and they're just going to roll with it because they naturally have the ability to succeed.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
usually that's what causes fatigue on your team, is just
Mhm.
also to how much in-depth management you have to have on franchisees that are not the ideal profile too.
Yeah, I think that's such an interesting point. The last one you made about the 80-20 percentage. And I've heard it. So I've come from a sales background. And so you hear, obviously I've been an individual contributor in that role most of my life, never really ventured out to be like a manager or director or like RVP of anything. And so all I can do is kind of assume, but based on what I've heard, you oftentimes see managers and directors spending a lot of their time, exactly what you said, with kind of the bottom tier sales
Mhm.
reps. And it's like, why are you spending so much time? It's like, well, because my top folks are, performing amazingly well.
Crushing.
What
Yeah.
if you spent as much time with them though, and continuing to ride that momentum with your top tier folks, and let the bottom folks are just going to weed out. You'll backfill them, and hopefully you get more top performers. So I get that totally. And the same concept, I want to say, was maybe Brian Beers. I don't know if you're familiar with him. I know he's a big voice on social media. He's a big franchisee, multi-unit franchise owner. I think he owns. I don't want to misspeak here, but I think it's Meineke Car Care Centers. He's got like 33 of these. I think he just bought into that one Painter's brand, and he owns like the entire Philly market. I think I subscribed to his newsletter, and he said something along those lines of like, my top performing shops, are doing 4 million plus in revenue, something like that. He's like, those are actually the folks that I spend the most time with. It's like, I want to get those shops and figure out what they're doing right, and also continue to support them. So, to your point there, I totally agree. You mentioned just something about kind of figuring out your ideal buyer. And then there's a lot around in the franchise space in general about fully absentee, semi-absentee, investor
Mhm.
models, owner operator. Can you talk about those models specifically in home services that you've seen that are like, that's a bunch of baloney, like that'll never work, or these all are very applicable and here's why? Like, what are your thoughts on just the different types of models that you can approach home services with as a franchisee based on like what you want to do? Like, I know some folks want to go from corporate job to, I still want to kind of have the same day to day. I'm a worker. I want to be owner operator in the business, and others are more investor type. That's the other end of the spectrum, and they don't want to really have any hand in the day to day. They just want to have management teams in place, fund the business, obviously make high level decisions for the business, but they want to be completely removed from the day to day. Talk about from your perspective just those different models and what works and what doesn't within home services.
So ultimately, I think as a franchisor, to spend time with your executive team identifying which type are going to perform the best for you and really only awarding those territories is key. I was speaking with the head of franchise development for Citywide as an example, and they are not home, but they are like commercial, residential cleaning, non residential cleaning, the commercial side of
Mm,
business. And she said, we have a very specific candidate. They are an owner operator and they work in the business and they understand the business and they run the teams and they deploy the resources. And that is our model. And
yeah,
they were very clear on it. And their AUVs are astronomical from anyone else I have seen in the space. I mean, multi-million dollar
yeah,
territories. It is wild.
mm,
And if you look at, in the similar sense, a business that's not a franchise, if the founder and CEO is a visionary and highly involved in driving culture in the network and in their employees and in their staff and in their agencies or partners, people perform better because so
yeah,
goes the leader, so goes the team. So I will say usually hands down owner operator franchisees are the most successful in most
okay,
cases,
yeah,
especially if it comes to like home services, because we've had three clients now in the home services space, and van concepts as an example. And so in that regard, you could be a multi-unit operator a lot easier because you're not putting up brick and mortar, you're not building out $500,000 $1.5 million build out. You have,
hmm,
in a home cleaning, usually a car, and like window cleaning, you have like a van or a truck concept, and so you're able to put more trucks on the road and still be a single
yeah,
unit franchisee running and operating the business but having scale.
yeah,
And in that case, I love an area developer model for van concepts because you have the ability to own a territory in a marketplace and to impact everybody alike, versus sometimes territories are so tight that your main competition is actually another franchisee in your system. So I think
mm,
even to like identifying your territory checks of how big they are, and could they have one or two that are next to each other so there's synergy in running those marketing plays and understanding how to take care of the customer. So it really always just depends on the concept. I think there is a lot of scale with area developers for restaurants or for fast casual as well, and
mm,
that's again easier for them to grow overall AUV of the locations to have a higher net worth overall of what they're investing in, on
right,
behalf of the brand. So it always just depends on the model. But by and large, I would say, especially in home services, because the trust of going into somebody's home and knowing that the person you're calling is responsible for the staff they're deploying and the team and the services, and you have their personal guarantee and commitment of locally owned and operated,
yeah.
almost hands down always has a better customer that becomes a raving fan.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Can we use owner operator as an example, and just to give us a little bit more insight into what momentum can do for brands that are looking to attract owner operator type profiles? Can you go a little bit layer deep there with how does momentum help an emerging brand identify an owner operator a candidate if that's what they've identified? Like, these are who we're looking for. What do you guys do exactly? How do you help there?
Yeah, so on the franchise development side, almost every brand has franchise development marketing needs. And then they also have competing consumer needs, local store, and grand opening. So those are the
Mhm.
four areas that we specialize in. But when it comes to franchise development, the first place where we start is by actually creating the key personas that you're looking for. And we have a really awesome process. We take you through their psychographics, their demographics, what their fears are, their frustrations, their pain points. Who are they influenced by? What brands do they like? Do they prefer text, email, phone calls? Like there is a lot you want to know about your customer today. To hit the nail on the head, you have to first think, what type of nail do I use?
Yeah.
Where do you place it? And then from there we take that customer persona demographic. Let's say you have anywhere from 3 to 5 that could be successful. One could be owner operator, one could be husband and wife passion project, one could be investor. You could have multiple targets in
Mhm.
franchise development. But for an owner operator, then we would say, okay, great, let's carve out and create some concepts for ads that would target him or her, and what this franchise concept would be wanting to solve.
Yeah.
What problems do they have that this franchise concept is solving?
Mhm.
I.e., I have lack of fulfillment in my career is pretty common today, and I want to do my own
Yeah.
thing. I want to be my own boss, etc. So number one, like, there's some commonalities of what potential franchisees are looking for. But second, when it comes to owner operator, you want to talk about like control and flexibility and what support the franchise brand provides. So then you're becoming part of the team. You're not running the business by yourself. You're not in it alone, but they are essentially a locally owned operator. So there's both control and the resources from the franchisor that are both exceptional for a candidate to know. The typical questions we get in the discovery day process is, where do I get the people and how many do I
Yeah.
need? And
Yeah.
almost every candidate, even if they're owner operator or not, will say, this is all great. I think the concept is there. I think the industry is fine. I like the leadership team. How do I market it?
Mhm.
Because even if you have a marketing background, it's always, where do I go and what do I say and what do I bring and how do I generate a lead that they
Yeah.
will then become a customer? And
Mhm.
so marketing inevitably, in my experience, has been the um, cast the villain of almost every franchise brand, because they are, quote, responsible for marketing and lead gen.
Yeah.
In the best case scenario, the franchisor is responsible for creating tools, resources, and excellent training and communication to the franchisees, and the franchisee is responsible for lead gen. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of clarity that needs to be created up front on just the structure of what the marketing team does and the
Yeah.
resources provided, especially for an owner operator, because they're going to be real estate, construction, leasing, grand opening, marketing, permits, staffing, HR, and they were probably an expert in one field of their career
Yeah.
before. And then
Mhm.
they're, much like the franchisor growth, learning how to do all things at the same time. So part of it too is having resources internally, a good field operations manager, a good marketing manager that can really coach people
Mhm.
through the process. But on the franchise development side specifically, we create the personas, then we really draft the content strategy for what your message points are on your differentiators, your why, your purpose, the call to action for someone, and then look at your email strategy, your text, how you nurture them through the process, and more. Like, it's a
Yeah.
very intricate sales process, as
Yeah.
I'm sure you know, because you have a sales background.
Well, I was going to say, I know because you walked me through an extensive presentation, and I was like, this is mind blowing and phenomenal. Um, I want to go back just to the lead gen piece of for franchisees, because I've had the same thought. If I were to go back in time and look into brands and become a franchisee myself, my biggest thing, I'm confident in all of my abilities, but marketing, like I'm confident even in like the HR piece, because I feel like I could,
Figure it
I at
out.
least have a general idea of how it works, and I could go and kind of brush up on stuff. I'd still, at some point bring in the specialist to handle that department, but digital and I should clarify, marketing at the local level versus digital. Like, I don't have a clue, didn't have a clue of how to market digitally to draw consumers into Junk Reader 6 years ago. That's where my business partner Ted specializes. That is his world, thankfully. But if I was a franchisee, that would be my main question, or two questions. One, that like, how do I get customers digitally? Like, I can pound the pavement. I have no problem going. Work ethic is great. I'll go out. I'll shake hands. I'll go to the Chamber of Commerce. I'll pop into local businesses. I'll do door hangers, yard signs, all the stuff. But how do you set up Google Ads? Well, how do you manage those campaigns? What are the keywords I use? Like, how much does it cost? How much did you spend on Google AdWords? Like, it's a whole thing. And the other piece of that, as a sidebar, would be personnel. Like, how do I go out and hire people? Where do I go to hire them? These are just, obviously two examples within a massive list of things that a franchisor, a good one, should be delivering, helping deliver to the franchisee and support them on as they set up their business. But I guess the question there, Brooke, is, we've bundled into our franchise offering that, right? That's a big piece of what I would be asking as a potential franchisee is like, what do I do digitally? I don't even know. Like, how do I set up a website? Does it all link back to your corporate website and I'll just get leads that way at the local level? Do I set up a different website? Do I have my own Google AdWords campaign? So like the answer is yes, you have to set up local Google ad campaigns and that has to be managed very closely. And so we've bundled that in for the audience, into our offering so that the franchisee can focus. Not, we don't want to pull you directly out of that where you don't have visibility into it. We want to quarterback it for you with you walking in lockstep with us, but we'll manage it overall. We want you focused on the local day-to-day, more outbound sales, local marketing type effort. Are you seeing more emerging brands, since you specialize in that area, doing that, or kind of still leaving the digital marketing piece to the franchisee to figure out as they launch?
So I would say the resources, to answer your very last question, the resources of scale have changed pretty rapidly. I've seen more franchise brands coming into the space with, uh, quite honestly, younger thinking and like
Yeah.
how do we scale different than what's been done before. And in that approach, a lot of emerging concepts have been managing the digital part in house.
Mhm.
There's a couple of things I always like to caution on. Number one, um, whoever is running the digital ads essentially assumes risk of lead flow and management. And
Yeah.
so if that's done by the franchisor, you better be certain that you have the
Mhm.
expertise, the ability, the manpower, the customer service,
Yeah.
the digital management opportunity to go in and physically be touching and managing and optimizing a campaign every day, plus the reporting, plus the
Mhm.
the executive communication afterwards to the franchisees on a monthly meeting. Because in most cases, brands either in-house digital for locations and mandate that, or they pick 1 to 2 agencies and mandate the use of one of our preferred vendors. So as an example, we have a list of preferred agency partners that we like to put in place when we are working with a brand, because we know they will execute your play on your behalf for a franchisee and hold the line and toe the line from brand standards to messaging to offer to what's allowed to not what's allowed. And
Yeah.
it essentially, in that version, it allows the franchisor to scale and put their resources to different time, talent, and infrastructure.
Mhm.
The risk with the agency is then somebody does still have to manage the agency and ensure
Yeah.
their P's and Q's are in place and that they're doing the right thing and still always pushing and challenging their results. However, in that setting, in this last example, if a franchisee is upset with an agency, your team can call them and talk to them and make it right, no problem. And the
Right.
franchisor is the hero. If the
Mhm.
franchisor is the franchisor and the digital agency partner, you're going to have people mad at you every single day because you're the franchisor or because of the digital ad performance. And so it just assumes a lot more risk
Yeah,
in general.
that makes
However,
sense.
I do see a lot of people doing it well. And we actually have one of our brand partners that does it exceptionally well. They not only place the ads, but they have a social media in house team. So, one of the trends I've seen lately is local Instagram and local Facebook accounts are difficult. The difficulty for a franchisee to manage is very high because they have
Mhm.
so many other things going on in their day-to-day operations. And yet for a local customer, the social media accounts is like the business card today. And they
Yeah.
will go to those accounts and see what type of business you're running and what type of content you have, especially if
Mhm.
your audience is a female as the driving customer. She will
Mhm.
validate on Instagram. And so the local approach and strategy on Instagram content in my opinion, actually needs to be more paramount than a digital ad. Because a
Mm,
digital ad, you could put any which thing in place. You can hyper target who you're speaking to and know exactly what you want them to say and the call to action and the clicks and manage it and track it. But then social is where people want to know your brand and your reputation.
yeah.
And do you do what you say you're going to do? And they will look at the comments to see if people are engaging with you. And that's like the social proof today
Mm,
that people really go for. So if you are going to do things in house, I think running ads is relatively easy to the point of you have a lot that you can report on and a
mm,
lot of metrics to see if winning and losing is going on, so it's very
yeah.
black and white. But on the social media side, we also have seen some emerging franchise concepts taking that on in house and running the local social accounts and applying really good growth strategies into the content for
Yeah.
social too. So I think digital, in my opinion, is emails, it's text, it's apps, it's online listings, it's SEO,
Mm,
it's pay per click, it's social ads, it's all the social media content. Like the when you lift up the rock of the digital
mm,
realm, there are a lot of ants that
yeah.
scurry, and you got to figure out how to do all of those things well. Now, on the other side, community marketing, franchisees will win or lose business every single day by what they do in their community.
Mm,
So most of the time, a franchisee will point their finger at the digital agency and say, I don't have enough leads,
mm,
Mr. Agency. But they're not pointing them fingers at themselves saying, and I'm also responsible for generating them in the marketplace. Because when you're in the marketplace and you're running ads, everything performs better.
mm,
People engage with the ads higher. They see you multiple times, 6, 7, 8 times. Now they're exposed to you. So they click on the ads better. So it is a combined approach today that works.
yeah.
And I think most people want to run an ad and like set it and forget it and just expect that to generate the business.
Mm,
And it's not that way.
yeah.
Excuse me.
No, no problem.
I've
Um,
been fighting the cold for about 10 days.
well, you've done great for 27 minutes. That's impressive. And we hope you feel better. It's interesting that you mentioned social, and I'm not a female, but I definitely go to social when I want to
Yeah.
validate a brand. Um, and I think it's important to note, like it's kind of like with any restaurant. I mean, the first thing I do is look it up how close it is to me and what the reviews are. Like if you're less than 4.5 stars, I'm probably not gonna be trying to go there.
Yeah.
Um, and then I'm also reading the reviews. It's very much so the same in home services, but like what I've seen lacking in the home services space specifically is on social. Like there aren't many great corporate pages for Joe Schmo's window cleaning, Davis's junk removal, gutter cleaning. Like if I had, got three guys out here to quote my gutters to clean them, like I could try to find them online, but I'm likely not unless it's a massive like well-known brand. And even then, I may not find like I may find I'm likely to find their page, but they don't post often. Or they, to your point, like they put out a
Yeah.
post, it got one like, somebody commented, and they didn't reply. So like I think that's an area for franchisees and franchisors. Like if you want to camp out and really know how to do really well with customer acquisition and just be customer centric, that is, meet your customers where they're at, and they're online today. And they're online in many different forms and fashions. And part of that is not just Google AdWords. Are they Googling junk removal near me? Sure, but they're also navigating away from that and getting to your socials. And if you have stuff there that's not always about like just word vomiting about your brand all the time, but actual engaging content that's fun. Like it just makes
Right.
it proves your brand over everybody else that they could choose from, because it gives them that human connection. Just like when I go to Google to read about Brooks Pizza Shop in Kansas City, like I want to see what people are saying about it. So we've always said that about junk, because junk removal is what it is, right? I go to your house, I pick up a couch, I put it in the back of the truck, you pay me, and I drive away. Like anybody can do the task, but it's everything else around running the business that, if you do everything else right, all the easy stuff we always say, right? Like you answer the phone, you're very friendly, you're transparent, you follow up, you get on site when you say you're going to get on site, you show up uniformed, your guys and gals are well spoken, they're nice and friendly, they make you feel good about welcoming them into your home. You're going to get a lot of business that way and a lot of repeat business. And it's the same, at least in my eyes, the same is true for social media. So just a hot take there, I guess. But you go ahead, Bob.
Oh, I was just going to say one. One tip for franchise brands is if there is not a high need for a local community build, only have one Instagram account.
Yeah.
And you need local Facebook accounts to run ad sets through for franchisees and to have your analytics, and Facebook is different too because especially in home services you can generate a lot through like being part of groups and mom
Mhm.
groups or parenting or new baby groups, whatever, and then people will ask for referrals in those types of settings, and it's a really great place to be part of, especially on Facebook. However, when it comes to Instagram, like Crumble Cookie, if you don't follow them on Instagram, you should. They have one account and it is exceptional content, and they have really high quality trending videos of cookies.
Mhm.
And it's you know what? Like you mentioned the couch, like I would have, if it's not me and I don't know if you have multiple accounts on Instagram, but I would have one account that you have
Mhm.
exceptional content on Junk Raider on Instagram that says, do you feel like that couch in your living room weighs 500 pounds? Like, it's not even about the weight of lifting it out of your house. It's about the weight it carries emotionally for somebody to get that crap out of their house
Yeah.
and the freedom they feel when they have space to do something different. And if
Mhm.
you press on the conversation that wants to be had and that is not having in a category, that's how
Yeah.
you separate yourself, because everyone knows, like, there's a book, it was written years ago, and it's like, does this clutter make my butt look big? And it's talking about how to shrink your life and all
Yeah.
the things that you need, because junk in your house literally is like
Mhm.
emotional baggage on people and the weight that it adds.
Mhm.
You don't need it. It can be a blessing to somebody else in their family.
Yeah.
Like the space and the freedom, like I could get rid of half of the things in the room that I'm in and not miss them. And we hold
Mhm.
on to things and the emotional attachment to them. And so there's so
Totally.
many conversations that brands today are missing because they just don't have the ability to think creatively about the conversation that needs to be had on channels and different channels, because you're doing so many different things. Like that's where partnering with something like a fractional CMO at Momentum Brands, we add the freshness and the crispness and what lands for the consumer on top of
Yeah.
all the great stuff you're doing inside of your brand. So it's like, because you sometimes just don't have the brain power to think of new idea things because you're also running the franchise business and then tending to the franchisees and doing all this stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's a, in separate, like on TikTok, I would have somebody be like, oh yeah, that's the junk guy. And then literally every single thing that's on TikTok is like how to eliminate junk, how to get something out of your house, how to
Yeah.
how to change your space quickly, and you become the expert. And it's a
Mhm.
completely different strategy than Instagram.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Well, no, you're fine, and I've seen that. Like I've mentioned it even too about really large brands that you would think would have a really mature social media stance and approach, and even then, it's really boring and dusty. Not to say that we are are light years
Mhm.
beyond. We're
Mhm.
not, but there's not any brand that I could point to, and maybe this is just based on the algorithms and things that I see, but there's not any brands that I could point to and be like, I just love engaging with this content. Like I may never buy, brothers that just do gutters cleaning services, but I really like the stuff that they put out, and so I think you're onto something there. I mean, I think not just onto something like that is super validating. So definitely something to keep in mind and work with your team on for sure. I'm curious, and we'll wrap it up here soon, Brooke. But you mentioned you work with specifically with emerging brands under 200 locations. Why? Can you tell us a little bit about why that niche for you guys?
So typically, we've actually had brands in the 1,000 unit count reach out, and believe it or not, they have oftentimes less resources than even emerging brands because
Hmm.
they just have more brand authority in the marketplace, and so they need less things or people or strategies. But there have been some franchise brands with over 1,000 units, and they do three things for grand opening, and they've been running the same play for 10 years. And they
Yeah.
could use the services just the same to think about how to reinnovate their brand. So it's not even about unit size for us. It's really about, like, we like to get, first of all, our selection on the industry alone. Like, is there white space for growth in the industry? Second, is the leader somebody who's really going to take the brand and implement everything that we create? And then third, like, is there opportunity for the customers to experience growth in the customer base, and what do they need or think about, and how can we reach them. So we look at those three deciding factors when taking on a brand, because like I'll use pets as an example. The pet category during COVID, the number of people that bought dogs in their family to expand their to, I guess, the opposite side of isolation, right? There was like all this isolation and in homes and loneliness and depression that
Mhm.
spiked during COVID. And then the adoption of animals was never at its highest. And then the purchasing of dogs was never at its highest. And as a result, now 3 4 years later, the grooming wait list to get your dog groomed could be up to a year long in some places, because the demand for groomers surged faster than what companies were even open today for pets. And so now we've seen like 5 to 7 really amazing pet grooming concepts come and surge very quickly, because the consumer demand was already there, and then they're like meeting the need, and they're saying, how can we do it different? So on some cases too, like really just wanting different industries that we're part of is part of the selection. Tell me your question, how you phrased it one more time, make sure I'm answering it.
Just why the niche of
Oh,
emerging
emerging.
brands and under 200 sites?
So the excitement for us at Momentum is to get in early and to help put you on the right track
Yeah.
fast. The greatest challenge in franchising is when you hit like your junior year and you're like, I've got
Yeah.
all these franchisees out there, and half of them like me and half of them don't. And I got to spend all my time in franchisee relationships. And so when you're turning that type of a business, it's like a cruise ship, and it
Yeah.
turns really slow to go back to the exact point to turn all the way around. If
Yeah.
you're turning a franchise unit of under 200 or less, like you could pivot and product innovation tomorrow and implement it and see immediate change.
That makes
And
sense.
so for us, like we really like to partner with people that like we can go hard, get immediate impact, and say like, let's implement this change, test it in your system, see if it works, document it, duplicate it, do it over and over and over. Because
Yeah.
franchising is a franchisee is buying a proven business model. The proven business model needs to adapt and adjust as the consumer marketplace does.
Right.
And so it's like getting in on, the first 10 years of growth is really like that sweet spot. So it's not even about the number of units. It's like being early enough to be able to make an impact great enough that they'll will sustain them for the course of their brand.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's not even about, I mean, it's a lot about the Zor, but it's even more so about the Z, right? If you guys can get in early enough with these brands and make sure the ships go in the right direction, that should yield massive positive results for the existing franchisees, but anybody that comes on board thereafter, because then it becomes just a blueprint of everything that you do in your world around franchise marketing. So
Yes.
totally get that. I'll ask one last question, Brooke. So, where are you most? And it's kind of a loaded question because I know that you don't camp out in one area specifically when it comes to franchisee candidate lead generation for Zors. But where are you most excited about the best places to like advertise and find franchise candidates? I know it's probably based on like the buyer persona, the type of brand you're selling, but like where have you guys seen just generally the most success? Whether that's something that's that's come on the scene in the last year or two, like Facebook's been huge, or no, Google AdWords are still where it's at, or SEO, or any of the above. Do you have any preference?
Yes. So there are a lot of verticals in franchise development for quality and quantity lead gen. Number one, if you have a really hot concept and can get in front of some broker network groups and they take it and run with it, you can experience really high quantity of sales. The
Yeah.
franchisor gets obviously significantly less of the franchise fee because you're paying a commission to those sales.
Mhm.
However, if you're looking for scale, always networking with a broker group is important, because they will take the concept and run with it, especially if it has legs, and sell it, especially if you have a unique selling proposition compared to others in your industry about franchise fees or startup times or cost or van cost or start whatever it is. Like
Yeah.
we first want to like create those message points and the storyline of the content, because you want to tell those to the brokers. You want that content differentiators to be in your social media content. You want
Mm.
it to be in your ad sets. You want them to be in your PR. You want it to be on your blog and your SEO content on your FranDev site. You want that same content to be in your email strategy and
Yeah.
in your lead follow up. And then you want to tell them all of those touch points in the discovery day process, also every which part of the process that they're in. And you
Mm.
want to always tell them the same things differently on the different channels. So
Yeah.
the very first way you start is by saying, what are the key core message points? What are the selling points? What are the differentiators, the purpose, the why? And
Mm.
then from there, you infuse it into all areas. Now, to answer the question very specifically, the number one driver that people are not thinking about today is LinkedIn. And the ad sets on LinkedIn usually perform well to start and then drop off because the audience size is so low. So, very few brands are investing in LinkedIn ads. And when I say LinkedIn, I mean a content strategy, not an ad strategy. So,
Yeah.
where we have seen success with our brands, more than a dozen now at Momentum Brands, is developing a robust LinkedIn content strategy where
Mm.
you're telling the story of the brand. You're talking about the differentiators. You're talking about your revenue streams. You're sharing the people and the faces behind the brand. You're
Yeah.
talking about the franchisees, the new franchise territory announcements. There's got to be a constant wheel of information on LinkedIn
Mhm.
present with high quality content in a daily format
Yeah.
on LinkedIn, because the people, no matter if you're looking for an owner operator to a area developer to semi absentee to investor groups, those individuals are on LinkedIn in their day jobs
Yeah.
and they are
Yep.
networking there and their friends are networking there. And that's where the executive and C suite and presidential people live, which are great franchisees too. So, having a content story that plays out across all of the channels, because any person that comes to you as a lead will go to validate in a different form, whether
Mhm.
it's on traditional social like Facebook and Instagram, whether it's on LinkedIn, whether it's on ads, your
And you
blog,
better be
they'll
where
go
they
and
find. You better be where they want to go. Right.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And the same messaging points to help validate and build the credibility of your business along the way. And it's
Yeah.
not, hey, we did this once. It's no, no. The consistency of the daily behavior over time.
Yeah.
Franchise development is the long game, it's not the short game. You have to do things every single day over time.
Mhm.
And then 90 days from now, you see a lead come through after 90 days of
Yeah.
daily activity on all things. So it's
Yeah.
always so much slower than what people want.
Mhm.
But if it's done right, it's the quality is there also with the quantity of leads.
Yeah. And I would tell folks as well, not that I have this licked by any means, but what I've learned in my sales career, because I've done a lot on LinkedIn, is you have to be consistent on there and you probably have to 10x your output based on where you like. If you think you need to do a lot, do that times 10 more, right? And kind of the whole Gary V mantra is like how much content you
Mhm.
put out. Somebody's like, I'm putting out 3 to 4 videos a day. Great, do 30 videos a day. And there, you hear that, especially me. I'm like, whoa, like how would I even do that? So I know I said that was the last question, Brooke, but part 1A to that question, because I'm interested in that. How much onus is on the Zor? Like if somebody's working with you and you're running their LinkedIn content strategy from a marketing perspective, how much is on the Zor to give your team so that you can, put out posts and everything? Or do you guys create a lot of stuff, pulling from various online sources from maybe from their website videos they've already created? Or do you require a Zor to like send you a daily video of them like documenting their day or getting out in the field and documenting their teams? Like how much effort is on the Zor to get you content that you can pretty up and put out on social media?
It's a great question. And we are always as good as the quality of information we are given when
Yeah.
creating content packages. So the way that and our LinkedIn content packages is different than our regular business. So we actually talk about innovation. We innovated with that last year because it was a niche and an opportunity that nobody was fulfilling in the space. And
Hmm.
so people are like, I would love to do LinkedIn. I don't know how, I don't know where, I don't know what to start, I don't know what to say. So we're
Yeah.
like, why don't we just offer a package? Because it was something all of our clients needed and wanted.
Yeah.
So first, our core bread and butter is fractional chief marketing officer and fractional brand director. Between myself and colleague, you get both of us on your brand in a retainer model fractional agreement. Then what we did was we introduced these LinkedIn content packages, and we have a series of meetings we take the brands through, but we essentially want to know the brand story, the founder story, your positioning, your selling, what the franchise fees are. Like we want all the big
Yeah.
nuggets of information on behalf of the brand. And then we take it and curate a series of content pillars that are going to drive alignment with your audience in the space.
Hmm.
And from there, once we have agreement on yes, this is the content pillars, then she and I are both trained copywriters. So we then write the content, design the post, create the assets, package it up, and then we do a review with the client. And after the review, we make any small edits that are needed, and then we package it off and hand it off to the brand. So then
Got
an
it.
executive assistant could post on your behalf. You could post it every day on your behalf, but it's 90 days of content posted Monday through Friday
Yeah.
for 90 days. And we don't stretch further than 90 days because the relevancy is so much
Hmm.
lighter if you go that far out in pre-planned content. But it's essentially like, could we be set up for a quarter of doing daily content every quarter of the year? And so then we really need like 4 to 5 weeks to get it all done. So it's a relatively fast project. And then we hand it off, and then the company implements everything, and then they come back and say, okay, great, we're ready for the next 90 days. And then there's another big surge. And by and large, the brands that people relate to most are when the founder or CEO or president has a face and is
Yeah.
present on the channels. And then you're sharing the content, your staff is sharing the content.
Hmm.
It's going to multiple streams of friend
Yeah.
groups and contacts. That's when it really works. But we have a very streamlined process to get down to the root of what's going to make you different. And then honestly, that content needs to be used in multiple channels:
Yeah.
emails, text, Facebook, Instagram,
Yeah.
blogs, etc.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I always love talking with folks with marketing backgrounds because I don't have one, and so I hear these things and
Mhm.
like I don't like subconsciously think these things. So when I'm talking with somebody like you and you're walking through everything that you know, it's like, man, I would never think of that, but it makes so much logical sense, and I think that's probably kind of a summation of how everybody thinks about social media these days. If you don't have like an a uniqueness, like if you don't have like what am I trying to say? Like you don't have just a natural being on social where you can think of like clever things to say, do, post. Like that's kind of how everybody thinks of it. Like it takes somebody like you or listening to Gary Vee or any other influencer, and then they put it out on the internet, and I see it, and I'm like, it makes a lot of sense. That's so logical, and so again,
Yeah.
fascinating stuff. Brooke, I appreciate you joining us and taking some time out of your day. I know that obviously talking with you, you've got a lot going on, so we appreciate you carving out a piece of your
Well,
day for folks that are interested in emerging brands, folks that are thinking about even franchising their business. Maybe they haven't even gone down that path yet. Having a conversation with you, what's the best way for them to find you and get in touch?
So LinkedIn, I'm very present on LinkedIn. I have like 7,000 connections, and I would love to meet anybody there. I try and share daily content. Momentum Brands definitely shares daily content. And then themomentumbrands.com is our website. So we have a lot of information there as well about just our services and I could always meet with somebody and share what we do and don't do, because we don't do a lot of things. We don't work inside of the brand. That's really what the
Yeah.
specialty lies with the franchisor, and like creating the culture and the transparency and the implementation.
Hmm.
But in general, themomentumbrands.com is our website. And then LinkedIn is
Okay.
a really great place to follow me. I do have an Instagram presence. On Instagram, I share tips to create momentum in your life, not in your business, because again, the audience is typically not like business owners per se, not like franchise brands on Instagram. So we do franchise content strategy on LinkedIn, and then I share tips on helping you create momentum in life on Instagram. So both are good places to follow. And then brookebudke.com. It's
Awesome.
also easy to remember, good
Yeah.
hub to direct you to any which place too.
That's great. No, we appreciate it again. By far the coolest background that we've ever had on the show. So don't ever, you talked about maybe getting stuff out of there and decluttering. I would, at least in the
Oh, no.
background, I would leave that.
All of this stays.
Yeah, all that stays.
You
But
don't
yeah,
see this view. No, I'm kidding.
well, Brooke, thank you again. It was a pleasure chatting with you. And I'm sure the audience got a lot of value out of this as well. So any
Great.
parting
Thanks,
thoughts?
David. No,
All
thank
right,
you.
we'll wrap it up. Thanks so much.